Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for August 20th, 2026. Today is peak day, the first day of the peak of the hurricane season, August 20th. It's the day that Dr. Bill Gray with Colorado State University always likes to ring the bell, and obviously God bless and God rest his soul to Dr. William Gray for Colorado State University. But today is the start of the ramp up for the Atlantic hurricane season, and with that, we might actually get activity coming very soon. And of course, we also have stuff to watch in the Pacific as well, as Tropical Depression 2C has formed today, and it might bring impacts once again to Hawaii. But we'll focus on that a little bit later on in the video. But let's start off, since today is a very important day in climatology. For the Atlantic hurricane season, let's start off by taking a look at the climatology graph. And if you are a hurricane tracker, you've probably seen this graph many times before, but this is basically a visualization of climatology of activity in the Atlantic hurricane season. And roughly, we are probably right about here, because August 20th, as I said before, is the first day of the peak of the hurricane season, meaning it is the first day in which, climatologically speaking, we see the fastest and largest ramp up in activity during the hurricane season. So we are roughly right around here right now, because this section of the graph is where we see the quickest ramp up, which takes us all the way till September 10th, which is the official peak day of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. So we are progressing closer and closer now. And we are basically right on the doorstep of the peak of the hurricane season. And where do we typically see activity now that we are at the last third of August and entering the peak of the hurricane season? Well, pretty much everywhere across the Atlantic. And that's why it is considered the start of the peak of the hurricane season, because you get development in the eastern Atlantic from tropical waves. Now that we are entering the peak, the wave train really turns on, and you probably start seeing some signals for Cabo Verde long tract activity. Hint, that's what we're already seeing right now beginning to pan out. And of course, you have activity scattered throughout the Caribbean and the Gulf and in the Western Atlantic. So pretty much anywhere in the Atlantic now, climatologically speaking, is open to tropical activity at this point in the season. But taking a look at the National Hurricane Center bulletin right now, do we have any activity that is expected in the next 7 days? And the National Hurricane Center is still saying not quite. Although, as I have been mentioning and we've been talking about and judging, if you can just guess by the title of today's video, I think that'll change, and it's probably going to change in just a few days from now. And I do think we're probably going to get a crayon, as they like to call it, a crayon, because the colors or whatnot, but a AOY highlighted area of some sort here, probably in the eastern MDR, because the models have been persistent, and they still continue today to show the potential of some sort of maybe decently long track system or something like that coming out of the MDR, about what you would expect for this time of year as we ramp up with the hurricane season and get closer and pretty much begin the peak. But I'll show you what the models show in just a little bit. The Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, also really ramping up now. We have Hurricane Lala, which was obviously a big story, especially for Hawaii this past weekend, but we might have another storm following in Lala's footsteps. Tropical Depression 2C, which is formed today, this morning. The first advisory released as of 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 a.m. Hawaiian Time. Maximum sustained winds at 35 miles an hour with a minimum pressure of 1,006 millibars, located at 11.9 north and 143.1 west. So this is west of 140 west, meaning it is within the confines of the Central Pacific, which is why we have the letter C at the end of the designation here, because C stands for Central Pacific, E would be for Eastern Pacific, and we might get another one here that'll probably get the E designation, another disturbance here, up to 80% chance of development in the next 7 days. So yeah, the Eastern Pacific is ramping up, but especially focusing here on Tropical Depression 2C, As I said before, this is likely going to follow in Lala's footsteps and in the very least get close to Hawaii. Right now, looking like it'll pass just to the south, but we still might see impacts here, and I'll show you that, and I'll show you the models for this depression in just a little bit. Moving on further, though, talking about the Atlantic right now, how does the Atlantic look like on the first day of the peak of the hurricane season here on August 20th? And right now, there's still not much happening out there. We have our tropical waves, which are moving off the coast of Africa still. The wave train is, chugging along, and that's going to continue to be the case for at least the next few weeks here before the wave train dies down once we get to late September and October. But we still are not seeing development yet. The dry air and the wind shear, things of which I'll touch upon in a little bit, have been keeping us quiet, and for now they're definitely doing their job. But again, maybe that will change here in just a matter of a week. And at least in the eastern Atlantic, conditions might try to become a little bit more favorable. And these tropical waves will continue to chug along here. And that's probably going to be the case, continuously here for the next few weeks. But anywhere else in the Atlantic where there's anything interesting right now, not really. I mean, there's some convective activity here in the Gulf. Looks like there's an upper level low over Florida. And then there's also some interesting systems here in the subtropics, although, again, none of them expected to develop. Although you never know, sometimes we could get a quick spin up from a front or any case like that. And I mean, we had that a week ago with, Crystal Ball, which was a very brief named storm here in the subtropics. And it got its origin from a low pressure that was able to quickly spin up and organize itself within just a few hours, and it was able to quickly snag a name. And sometimes you can't predict those instances, so maybe we might have to watch for that here over the next few weeks. And anything could happen now, since it literally is today, the first day of the peak of the hurricane season. Anything can happen, but nothing bubbling up just yet. And looking at our waves right now across the Atlantic basin, again, the wave train is very active. We have a few, two in the eastern and central MDR right now, one just about entering the Caribbean, and that's probably bringing some gusty winds, and it's probably this wave here that is on the satellite, bringing some gusty winds and some shower activity to the Caribbean islands, which you guys do need. As I've been saying for some time now, the Caribbean has been suffering from a drought this year thanks to El Nino, because El Nino suppresses tropical waves, which helps us, and it prevents development from occurring. But sometimes, especially with how powerful these El Nino conditions are, with the very strong wind shear across the Caribbean, it ends up killing off tropical waves as well, which, besides the aspect of the potential for development, brings crucial and necessary rain to the Caribbean islands. Especially, many of the economies in the Caribbean are very much based off of farming and crops, and when you have droughts, you don't have as favorable conditions for farming. So either way, you guys need the rain, and hopefully we'll at least be able to continue to get these tropical waves to move through and bring that rain. But as I've been mentioning before, wind shear being an issue this year, especially throughout this entire hurricane season so far, and it is on full display right now. Wind shear very strong across the Caribbean. Values here at least 25, 30 knots, even 40 knots in some places. And then that extends even into the deep tropics and in the eastern Atlantic right now. Very, very strong wind shear present. But there are small pockets here of wind shear in which we see it lower in the eastern Atlantic. And I think that's probably our best bet for where we can get development in the deep tropics right now. And that's also our best bet where the models are starting to show the potential for some development. But the MDR here should see a slight reduction in wind shear, at least over the next week. But the Caribbean, still ripping with wind shear, and that's probably the one place in which that is not going to change this entire season. And of course, the dry air as well, mid-level dry air, a very, very big issue. And besides the wind shear killing off these storms, dry air too is actually probably having an even bigger effect in terms of drying out these waves, not permitting convection from being able to occur, especially with how potent the mid-level dry air is right now, just in general, strung out across the Caribbean. And of course, some of it has to do with Saharan air, which is a very common thing that we see, especially early on in the hurricane season. But a lot of this too has to do with the general background state of the atmosphere, thanks to El Nino, and it just creates lots of dry, stable air in the atmosphere, which suppresses convection, which suppresses and dries out these waves, and because of that, we don't see development. And we saw that last week, especially when we had two invests come out of the MDR, and one of them had a very likely chance of developing, and I thought it was going to develop, but it didn't because of all of the dry air out here in the deep tropics. But these tropical waves still continue to move off the coast of Africa. I mean, there's one here right now, and then there's also, you can see the moisture really associated with another wave moving off the coast of Africa. And now that we are heading into the last third of the month, I would like to see if, or I would want to start watching to see if maybe, hopefully, at least from development aspects, these waves come off the coast of Africa and maybe try to help moisten the environment a little bit, at least in the eastern Atlantic, enough so that once the time comes, these tropical waves have at least a little bit of a better environment so that they are able to spin up and actually develop. And seemingly, the models are hinting at that potentially occurring here in the next few days. But for now, all of the unfavorable conditions that I mentioned, once again, what is the main reason? Well, El Nino here. That's probably the biggest factor for this hurricane season. Just the very, very strong El Nino that we are seeing take place in the Pacific right now. And I mean, it is just incredible what we are seeing. Up to 5 degrees Celsius anomaly patches here beginning to show up pretty consistently in the eastern Pacific right now. A very wide tongue as well. Of even up to 4 degrees Celsius anomalies showing up, and we even have solid shadings here of 3 degrees Celsius too. So this is just all going to help create a very, very strong, record strong El Nino, which is, I mean, we are already in record territory, but we are guaranteed to peak as a record strong El Nino this year, and that's also what's creating the train of activity in the Pacific too, which is obviously rearing its ugly head at Hawaii right now, because again, El Nino creates very favorable conditions in the Pacific, but in turn, we generally see very, very strong wind shear rip throughout the Caribbean and a very, very stable background environment in the Atlantic, which suppresses tropical activity. But on the other hand, sea surface temperature anomaly-wise across the Atlantic, especially the eastern Atlantic, is very warm. And that is something that we've especially seen kind of come to play here in just the last few weeks. In fact, not only are we, above normal, but especially here in the eastern Atlantic and especially the northeastern Atlantic off the northwestern coast of Africa near the Canary Current, very, very above normal. Some of these anomalies as much as 1 to even 2 degrees Celsius above normal. In fact, this is probably one of the warmest looks I've seen in a while to the northeastern Atlantic here. And it's important because it sounds quite hard to believe, but especially when we have very, very warm sea surface temperatures here in the northeastern Atlantic, that does actually correlate to above normal hurricane activity in the Atlantic. But obviously, we have a very, very strong El Nino, which is absolutely more than likely going to counteract that this year. But it's important to think about, especially that we are now approaching the peak of the hurricane season. The sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic are very warm. So does that counteract the very strong El Nino that we have out here in the Pacific a little bit? Will we see these tropical waves, get a boost from the very warm sea surface temperatures enough that they could try to overcome the very unfavorable atmospheric conditions we have in the Atlantic right now? And looks like we might have a chance for that here, at least over the next week. And taking a look at the ensembles, they've been very aggressive for the last few days and showing a tropical wave sometime next week emerging from Africa. And you can see that very clearly here on the Google AI ensembles. Roughly about, let's see, around 6 to 7 days out, you could see a wave. We start seeing low pressure signals here, and then eventually it moves westward. And that looks like a pretty solid signal here showing up on the Google AI ensembles, and even on the European too. In fact, the European is more aggressive, and this is from the 0Z run. Definitely a signal that looks very solid, and quite a few ensemble members too showing activity. So when you have both of the ensemble models here agreeing on a signal, especially now that we are in late August, maybe that is a sign that something is indeed coming. And the models have been showing this signal persistently for the last few days, and we still have a few days left in which the models could potentially downtrend on this signal. In fact, some are saying that we kind of are seeing a little bit of it today, and maybe this signal could once again downtrend and kind of fade into oblivion due to the models potentially, still picking up on the environment not being favorable enough for development. But I kind of find it hard to believe that nothing is going to try here, at least over the next week, because once again, we are now in the peak of hurricane season. We are getting towards the very end of August. Climatologically speaking, things should start to become a little bit more favorable, and you would just think that something would break through. And I've been saying it for probably the last 2 or 3 weeks now that I think at least one of these tropical waves are going to break through. But I really do believe it, even if it's going to take a little bit of extra time here, especially in a year like this where, as I've just showed you, we have very, very unfavorable wind shear and lots of dry air out there. We need at least just one aggressive tropical wave that will have enough energy with it that it'll try to break through and fight back and develop. And I think this signal here that is showing up on the models next week definitely looks very promising, and it will continue to look promising to me for as long as the models show it. And as I'll show you here as well on the GFS for the 12Z run, even on this run too, you can see here a very aggressive tropical wave comes off the coast of Africa, and roughly around 7 days out, you could start seeing it develop here on the model, and it actually becomes a pretty solid storm as it moves on off to the west. Now, before you start asking me what about impacts to the Caribbean or Bermuda or any chance this has to go towards the United States, we can't even think about it just yet. That is very, very far down the line. But the main thing that I'm watching for right now is that there is a signal on the models, and there's definitely a pretty solid signal here on the Google AI. And again, don't want to focus on the track here, because if you were to focus on the track, you might say that maybe this signal might actually be interesting for areas a little bit further west. But again, what I'm trying to pay attention to is the signal, and obviously there are definitely a handful of ensembles showing up on the Google AI map, the European ensemble map as well. Definitely a very solid signal. Again, probably majority of the ensembles developing something. And then we look at the operational models here. The GFS definitely has something trying to develop here. Let's even see if the European on the 6Z run develops something. And yes, they do. And especially when the European operational develops something, that is a very interesting signal to me. But even the European AI as well on the latest run, we definitely see development occur. And we actually see some decent intensification here as this gets further west. But I don't want to pay attention to that just yet. Just pay attention to the signal. And it's showing up on every model. So because of that, at least in my mind, thinks that the models are all picking up on something. And I think it is something that we will have to watch here come next week. And again, right on cue, as we are now entering the peak of the hurricane season, and it's just a matter of time before something happens. So we will be watching the Atlantic very closely come the next week, as it looks like things might finally be ramping up here. Moving on to the Pacific, though, because we have activity that is currently happening right now, and unfortunately, we might see impacts to land once again. And the Central Pacific has been very active here over the last week or so, and not very surprising given, again, going back to the sea surface temperatures here, the very, very strong El Nino that we have setting up shop. I mean, not just setting up shop, it's pretty much set up already, but it's just continuing to intensify. And obviously with that, we have very favorable conditions in the Pacific, and that's producing quite a bit of activity. We have Hurricane Lala here, which obviously was a very big headlining storm for Hawaii last week. 4 feet of rain and hurricane force winds brought to the Big Island. I mean, especially at the higher altitudes, we had some places that saw Category 4 winds, and this wasn't a Category 4. Well, it did actually become a Category 4 storm, but that happened yesterday while it was out to sea here. But we had a very strong storm, a very impactful storm, but we might have another one brewing right behind it, and that is Tropical Depression 2C, which again, as I mentioned, got designated earlier today. And let's zoom in on Tropical Depression 2C here, and it's definitely doing pretty decently this afternoon. Kind of has a banding shape, developing with it, although it still has some development, left to do. This is probably dealing with maybe a little bit of easterly shear. Not the most organized looking storm, but it's definitely getting its act together, and probably on its way, definitely, to becoming the next named storm of the Central Pacific here, which is Moke or Mocha. Not exactly sure. I think it's Moke because it's Moke. So because of that, you would say Moke. Definitely a very interesting name, and you probably very much would say Lala was an interesting name as well. But here we have yet another storm, and I do actually want to show you this new page here. This is from Tropical Tidbits, and this is their current storm page, and I want to show you it because I do find it very interesting, and I actually, do pull a lot of graphics that I use quite often on the channel from this page here, but it's all lined up together. You have the National Hurricane Center cone, and then you have the track guidance maps here and the intensity guidance map as well, and you could just get it from this one page. So I find it very neat. And starting off with the National Hurricane Center track, well, they do expect this to become a named storm over the next few days here, probably by tomorrow. We should see that occur. And then the current National Hurricane Center forecast track luckily brings the storm just to the south of Hawaii, although I think this is probably very much dependent on the intensity, which I do believe the National Hurricane Center forecasts this peaking at roughly around 70 miles an hour right now. But if this is somehow able to intensify a little bit more than that, you would wonder if we could see some, nudges in the track to the north. But either way, the National Hurricane Center did mention that they're probably going to issue some watches and warnings to Hawaii, regardless. And that's another thing too that you need to keep in mind. Even if the track ends up happening and we see this track just to the south of Hawaii, we could still very much see impacts from the outer bands, and not even just outer band impacts, but even some decent impacts as well. And I mean that kind of happened with Lala. Lala did not make a direct landfall on Hawaii, although it did barely scrape the southern portion of the Big Island, enough so that the eye wall still ended up battering the island. And of course, with that, we saw rainfall spread across all of the northern islands here, in which obviously from that we ended up getting many widespread areas seeing up to 2 to even up to nearly 4 feet of rainfall. So just because the track here is to the south of the island right now, that does not mean that you can write this storm off and allow yourself to be caught off guard. Still have to watch this very closely, and we definitely will be doing that. And taking a look at the latest track guidance right now here from all of the models, and we'll actually go to what the models show in a little bit. All of them do keep it to the south, but again, we'll watch and see whether or not over the next few days here we see some track shifts to the north. This does approach Hawaii, or get very near the island roughly 3 to 4 days out, which that is still enough time for us to see some shifts in the track, especially even still 4 or 5 days out. That's a very long time. That's nearly an eternity when it comes to hurricane tracking. And I think if you are if you've been tracking the tropics for a long time now, you would know a lot can change in just a matter of 4 or 5 days, even 3 days. So bottom line, what I'm saying is, as long as the track here is very near the Hawaiian Islands, and until we see more certainty that this is going to stay far enough south that this is not as big of a threat to Hawaii, I would be keeping a very close eye out on Tropical Depression 2C here. And let's take a look at what the models show for the 12Z run with the GFS here. And you could see, interestingly enough, though, on this run today, the GFS is not necessarily developing the storm too much. And I did see Andy Hazelton talk about the fact that the models have kind of latched onto less favorable conditions and slightly stronger wind shear with Tropical Depression 2C. And let's actually take a look at the relative humidity that this storm will have, and you can see that it does kind of get wrapped up in a lot of dry air in the surrounding environment. But still, I think this is a good map to show the precipitation and the humidity here still makes its way towards the island. So either way, even if this doesn't end up a very strong storm and this tracks just to the south, that does not rule out the potential for some rainfall here and some impacts of some sort from this depression, or Mocha, as it very likely will be in a few days. But I do find the GFS here a little bit too bearish on this storm, because if you can look at the model here, this barely develops beyond a tropical depression to maybe a weak tropical storm. But the National Hurricane Center is forecasting this to intensify to roughly around 70 miles an hour or so, near hurricane strength. So if the GFS is not correct here and it's being a little too bearish in the intensity, maybe that'll have an implication on the track. And the storm being further south probably means that this will track just to the south of Hawaii. But if this ends up a stronger storm, you can't rule out the fact that maybe the GFS might shift to the north and we end up seeing this get much closer to Hawaii once again. So bottom line, what I'm saying is keep a very close eye out on Tropical Depression 2C, as it very likely could potentially be another storm to bring impacts to Hawaii, especially that we are dealing with, and we are just coming off of Hurricane Lala, which literally just made an impact and just impacted Hawaii this past weekend with pretty serious effects. So I think everybody in the islands should be, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you out there will be, keeping a very close eye on Tropical Depression 2C. And of course, we will be doing that here on this channel as well. So stay tuned, because the tropical train continues here in the Pacific, and that's probably not gonna relent probably for at least the next few weeks as we really get into the peak of the season as well in the Pacific. And before you know it too, we're probably going to start watching for things impacting places like Mexico as well, especially once we get into the late season. So lots to watch here in the tropics over the next few weeks, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and I promise you, we will be keeping you covered in the days and weeks ahead. So stay tuned. With that being said, though, thanks for watching today's video. That's going to do it for now. If you enjoyed what you saw, I would really appreciate if you like this video, comment any thoughts or questions you have below, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you can get these tropical updates, which will continue to happen on a daily basis, so you can stay up to date on the tropics. And I promise you, I will keep you as up to date on the tropics as you could possibly be. So if you look forward to that, again, please subscribe to the channel and share this channel and share this video with family and friends as well, and others who might be interested in staying on top of the tropics too. The more the merrier, right? Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day. Hope you guys make it a great one. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. and I'll be back with more tomorrow.